The story begins on an ordinary morning with two main characters, a man and a woman, each living alone in their own apartments. Yet, despite their separate lives, both are experiencing the same pressures and challenges that may seem small but carry a heavy, emotional weight. Household chores and the tiny details of everyday life. He, an ordinary man, not particularly special, but always wanting things to be neat, wakes up to the morning light streaming through his window. He sits on the bed for a moment, looking around at the cluttered room, clothes that haven't been folded, papers scattered on the floor, and a sink full of dishes from last night. A heavy feeling rises in his chest, fatigue, pressure, and self-criticism. He gets up, takes a deep breath, and begins cleaning. Every dish he washes, every surface he wipes. He reminds himself that he is doing well, but deep down, a lingering worry remains. Am I good enough? Will things ever be perfect as I hope? These questions echo endlessly in his mind, like tiny droplets gradually wearing him down, leaving him both exhausted and tense. She, a woman living alone, also starts her morning in the quiet of her apartment. She opens a window, inhales deeply to welcome the fresh air and sunlight, and looks around the room. Clothes still unfolded, a few dishes left in the sink, and a room that's not yet perfectly tidy all create a sense of pressure, but hers is different. Instead of frustration or self-blame, she closes her eyes for a moment and tells herself, I've done my best. Step by step, everything will be okay. While he feels tired, frustrated, ashamed, and sometimes angry at himself, she maintains patience, calmness, and a gentle acceptance that perfection is not necessary. To people facing the same situation, yet their experience of stress and the way they handle their emotions are completely different. Every small detail, the dishes left unwashed, the dust on the floor, the scattered papers, becomes a mirror reflecting their inner emotions. It's not just about cleaning. It's about how they interact with pressure, deal with fatigue, and evaluate themselves. He often asks himself, am I failing? Is my effort enough? The feeling of never being perfect keeps him tense, sometimes silently blaming himself for small mistakes. On the other hand, she realizes that sometimes taking one step at a time is enough. That sense of relief helps her stay calm, even when the room is still not perfect. Day after day, week after week, they repeat these routines. Mornings start with chores, small moments spent organizing things, then moments of self-reflection. But the remarkable thing is, each learns to handle pressure in their own way. He is tense, frustrated, and sometimes disappointed with himself. She is calm, patient, gentle, and persistent from the smallest details, an uncleaned table, dishes in the sink, a slightly dusty floor. The story paints a broader picture of life, pressure, emotions, and the human struggle to balance everything. It's not just household chores. It's a mental challenge, a way each person confronts fatigue, disappointment, and the fear of not being enough. And from these small mornings, the story will lead us into greater challenges, difficult decisions, tense moments that make them question whether they are on the right path, whether their efforts are sufficient, and whether this pressure will ever end. Listeners step into the world of these two characters, observing every detail, every action, every private thought, feeling the tension, the stress, and the perseverance they show themselves. From seemingly small actions, the story unfolds a complex and profound emotional world, where even the most ordinary tasks carry unseen but significant weight, And this is just the beginning. What's coming next will be even more challenging, more intense, making the audience wonder, do they have the endurance, patience, and empathy to face life's pressures as these two characters do? The morning passed in its usual rhythm, but the pressure of daily chores and life began to build, creating a series of small but intense conflicts. He, after washing a few dishes, glanced around the apartment. There were still specks of dust on the floor, papers scattered across his desk, and the sink was not completely clean. A feeling of helplessness rose in him. He muttered to himself, "Why can't I ever get this right? Why is everything always messy? Am I failing?" That frustration gnawed at him like a constant drip, each tiny detail in the apartment feeling like a personal indictment of his incompetence. Meanwhile, she was at the sink, washing dishes, hands wet, eyes calm. A little fatigue tugged at her body, but she reminded herself, step by step, everything will be fine. No need to rush or be perfect. That quiet patience kept her moving steadily through the chores, even though the apartment wasn't spotless. As the day went on, his tension escalated, while her patience deepened. Every dish, every scattered paper, every speck of dust became a measuring stick for their emotions. He measured it in frustration and self-reproach. She measured it in calm and persistence. Then small accidents began to push the tension higher. He tried to move faster, organizing things quickly, but spilled water, broke a glass. It was a minor accident, but for him, it felt like the last straw, a sudden surge of failure and frustration. He sighed, hand pressed to his forehead, berating himself. Why am I so clumsy? At the same time, she noticed a plate slip into the sink, a tiny ceramic shard breaking off. She picked it up, cleaned it, and placed it carefully aside, thinking, it's fine. I'll do better next time. No stress, no anger, just a quiet acceptance of reality. These moments highlighted the internal conflict. He was trapped between effort and failure, between his expectations and reality. She, on the other hand, maintained patience but faced a silent underlying pressure, balancing tidiness with not overexerting herself. As the afternoon wore on, the contrast grew sharper. He felt like everything was against him. The sink, the scattered papers, the minor mistakes he couldn't control. She felt the pressure too, but lighter, aware that if she wasn't careful, things could become messy and she needed to balance patience with responsibility. It's in these subtle conflicts that the story begins to show how each person handles stress and emotions, how small decisions carry weight over mood, mindset, and sense of control. By late afternoon, their internal struggles smoldered quietly, like a slow-burning fire. He felt frustrated, disappointed, and increasingly so. She remained calm, patient, but also aware of the quiet weight of independence pressing on her at this point. The story is no longer just about chores or tidiness, it's an internal battle, a subtle war of emotions, pressures, and self-expectations that each character must navigate day after day. The afternoon wore on, but the pressure and tension didn't ease. If anything, it seemed to pile up, like small snowflakes rolling into an ever-growing snowball. He, having just finished a few dishes, glanced around the apartment with a tense expression. A paper had slipped onto the desk. A few shirts remained unfolded, and there were still specks of dust on the floor. He felt out of control. Every tiny detail now seemed like a relentless reminder of his failures. He sank into a chair, sighing, heart racing, muttering to himself, "Why is everything always a mess?" Why can't I ever get it right? Meanwhile, she was folding laundry, hands moving steadily, eyes focused but calm. A few damp towels, a shirt not perfectly folded yet. She only smiled gently and reminded herself, it's okay. Step by step, everything will be fine. Her patience and composure were like a cool breeze, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside him as the afternoon continued. The rush of life outside began to intrude, pushing both into more uncomfortable situations. He received a work call, an irritable email from his boss, all while the apartment remained cluttered. The sense of overwhelm, pressure, and frustration surged like waves, making him feel he almost wanted to give up entirely. He tossed a dish towel aside and moved to the window, taking a deep breath. Yet his mind remained tangled. She, facing her own work messages and pending tasks, felt a quiet pressure as well. But instead of losing her calm, she paused, breathed, and broke down each task into smaller, manageable steps. She seemed to know exactly how to balance pressure with composure, responsibility with emotional steadiness. These seemingly ordinary moments began to amplify the internal conflict in him. He looked around the apartment, every piece of paper, every dish, every speck of dust felt like an indictment of all his shortcomings. The tension, combined with outside pressures, left him feeling trapped in a near-hopeless cycle. In contrast, she remained calm, though the silent pressure continued to accumulate, requiring constant patience and self-control. Every small action, folding laundry, washing dishes, organizing papers, became a test of endurance and emotional resilience. And it's precisely in these quiet conflicts, these mounting pressures, that the story reveals the profound differences in how the two individuals handle stress. He internalizes and bottlenecks his emotions, growing frustrated and self-critical. She, on the other hand, maintains patience, breaking down the pressure into manageable parts, moving forward slowly but steadily. What's coming next will push them even further, as both will face unexpected situations and unforeseen complications, escalating emotions and forcing them to confront the limits of their own endurance. Asterisk. The afternoon had shifted into early evening, the light outside fading, bringing with it a slow, simmering exhaustion and pressure that filled the apartment. He stood amid the clutter, every small detail, the few dishes left in the sink, the messy desk, scattered papers on the floor, seemed to awaken feelings of failure and helplessness. He took a deep breath, yet the suffocating sensation didn't lessen. Every tiny detail felt like a relentless reminder of his inadequacy, small failures stacking into a heavy mental burden. Suddenly, his phone rang. A tense work call, the harsh tone of his boss pressing in, adding yet another layer of pressure. He held his breath, took a deep inhale, but the feeling of anger, frustration, and helplessness surged. He tossed the dish towel onto the floor and paced, his heartbeat rising, every step emphasizing the growing tension and inescapable stress. The storm of emotions inside him was about to break, and he almost wanted to give up entirely. Meanwhile, she received an urgent message from a colleague, along with several tight deadlines. She walked calmly to her desk, opened her laptop, but didn't rush. Instead, she took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a moment to focus, and began breaking down her tasks into smaller steps, tackling each one with composure. The pressure remained, but she understood that maintaining calm was key to staying in control. Every small action, folding laundry, wiping the table, washing dishes, became a way to preserve her mental stability and sense of control. As the evening progressed, the external pressures intensified, pushing both of them into increasingly stressful situations. He tried to organize things quickly, but knocked over a cup of water onto his desk, soaking papers. He felt pent-up anger and frustration erupt, mixed with worry and self-reproach. He let out a short shout, an attempt to release the tension. Yet it only heightened his feeling of helplessness. She, noticing a few misplaced dishes and a damp towel, felt the pressure finally hitting a peak. Yet, instead of losing her composure, she exhaled deeply and reminded herself, one step at a time. It's okay. Her patience now wasn't merely a trait, had become a mental shield. A weapon against the mounting storm. The real climax struck when he received another urgent email while the apartment remained chaotic. This is the clothes, the scattered papers, all acting like weighty reminders of his lack of control. Each detail seemed to conspire against him, pushing his stress to the limit, his heart racing. Mind taut like a tightly strung wire. She, still calm, could not ignore the silent pressure accumulating. Tense shoulders, stiff neck, a lingering sense of strain. Yet she continued, methodically, folding, washing, organizing. Each ordinary task became a method of resisting the pressure, maintaining rhythm, and finding solutions step by step at this moment. The story reaches its emotional peak. Two people, one bottling frustration and nearly ready to surrender. The other patient, composed but quietly stressed are, each confronting their personal limits. Small, seemingly trivial actions now become decisive moments, highlighting the stark contrast in how they handle tension, pressure, and emotion. The audience is drawn deeply into their tense, layered inner worlds. Every heartbeat, every breath, every chaotic thought, every stressful moment, everything is setting the stage for the crucial decisions to come, where how they react will determine who maintains control, who gets swept away by emotion, and who finds a way out of the storm of pressure. Night had fallen, the dim light from the ceiling casting soft shadows across the floor. The apartment, already cluttered, felt heavier in the muted glow. He sat in a chair, eyes tense, hands pressed against his knees. Every leftover dish, scattered paper, and tiny fragments seemed to accuse him of countless invisible failures. The pressure and frustration built up inside him, his heartbeat quickening, his mind taut like a stretched wire. He took a deep breath, but still felt the heavy weight of stress pressing down on his body and mind. He tried to pick up his phone, hoping to call a friend to share his frustrations, but his fingers trembled. Inside him was a mix of exhaustion, anger, worry, and self-reproach. Everything around him seemed to mirror his chaotic thoughts, the messy apartment reflecting a tangled mind. Each small detail amplifying the sense of helplessness. She, standing in the middle of the room folding laundry, looked out the window as if searching for a moment of calm amid the storm. She was tired, aware of both work and household pressures, yet she maintained absolute composure. She reminded herself, one step at a time, one task at a time. It will be okay. The pressure existed, but instead of letting it dictate her emotions, she knew how to use calm as a tool. Each small action helping her maintain mental control. Seemingly minor moments had suddenly become decisive. He threw a shirt onto the chair, inhaling deeply, yet a smoldering anger lingered inside. She noticed a few misplaced dishes and damp towels, no longer a trivial annoyance, but a conscious awareness of responsibility and emotional control. Then an unexpected moment occurred. He knocked over another glass onto the floor. The shattering sound echoed through the quiet room like thunder in a still sky, igniting the peak of his frustration and disappointment. He let out a shout, seemingly to release the pent-up emotions. Yet the sense of powerlessness and failure only intensified. She, witnessing this, felt the pressure more acutely than ever. But she did not yell, did not tense. She picked up the shards, cleaned carefully, and rearranged everything with a calm precision, as if patience and willpower had become armor for her mind. The contrast between them was clear, every small action highlighted. How they each confronted stress and emotion differently. The air in the room grew heavier. Exhaustion, pressure, and tension seemed to weigh on every breath. He felt like giving up, even thinking about abandoning everything, while she maintained patience, addressing each minor detail meticulously, holding rhythm and controlling her emotions. This climax wasn't just about small actions, throwing a shirt, washing dishes, organizing papers. It was a true internal battle where emotions, pressure, and self-reproach intertwined. He was swept up by feelings, exploding with worry and frustration, while she remained patient and calm, using each small action to stay grounded and resilient. This was the decisive moment, where how they reacted would directly shape their mood, mental state, and the outcome of the day. These moments stretched on like a storm of emotions, drawing the listener deeply into the tension of their minds and the confrontation with human limits, setting the stage for the next part, where final decisions and resolutions would unfold. Late at night, the apartment was nearly silent, broken only by the ticking of a clock and the sound of their breathing. The pressure that had been quietly building all day now erupted like an unstoppable storm, pressing down on every corner of the room and every fiber of their beings. He stood in the middle of the room, hands trembling, shoulders tense, eyes wild with a mix of helplessness, frustration, and anger. Each breath felt heavy, each heartbeat rapid, as if his body itself were mirroring the chaos inside his mind. She remained standing, folding the last of the clothes, but her gaze had sharpened, her jaw tight with the weight of the day. She exhaled slowly, trying to steady herself. Yet beneath her calm was an accumulation of silent tension from endless work tasks, household responsibilities, and the mounting frustration emanating from him. Every moment had brought them to a breaking point, a place where neither could avoid facing the raw intensity of their emotions. He tossed a shirt onto the chair, then turned to her, voice shaking. I can't do this anymore. It's all too much. I'm failing at everything. His words stumbled over themselves, reflecting the chaotic turmoil inside. He felt crushed by self-doubt, fear of judgment, and the relentless weight of expectation, as if the room itself were conspiring against him. She inhaled deeply, striving not to let panic or frustration dictate her actions. She stepped closer, voice steady but soft. I know, but we'll handle it together, one step at a time. Don't let your emotions control you. Her words were a lifeline, a beacon of calm and reassurance in the eye of the emotional storm. Yet he was still overwhelmed. Stepping nearer, voice rising with tension, but everything always ends up a mess. I try so hard, and it's never enough. The helplessness, pressure, and self-reproach had accumulated to a point where he almost felt paralyzed. Wanting to lash out simply to release it all, she placed a steady hand on his shoulder, her eyes serious yet brimming with determination. We can't fix everything at once. Just one thing, one step at a time. If this storm feels too strong, I'll share the weight with you. You don't have to face it alone. Her voice carried strength, patience, and unwavering compassion, a guiding force cutting through the chaos. In that moment, the room seemed to pause. He looked at her, touched her hand, and for the first time in hours felt an anchor amid the whirlwind of emotions. Every drop of sweat on his brow, every rapid heartbeat, every short, uneven breath became a marker of the emotional climax, where both of them were forced to confront their limits and vulnerabilities. Their conversation was quiet, almost intimate, but every word, every gesture, every glance carried the weight of meaning. This was the moment where exhaustion, frustration, love, and care collided, pushing the story to its peak of psychological and emotional intensity. She gently held his hand, guiding him to breathe deeply with her, as if sharing the burden, redistributing the weight of their combined stress. Slowly, the tension began to ease, replaced by a tentative understanding, a calm acknowledgement of shared struggle and the subtle bond of connection. He exhaled long and steady, feeling the first traces of relief wash over him, as if a storm that had threatened to consume him was finally beginning to pass. The apartment grew quiet once again, but it was no longer oppressive or suffocating. Instead, it held a new sense of balance, a fragile peace born from confrontation and honesty, setting the stage for the final part, where they would reflect, resolve lingering tensions, and find meaning in the trials they had endured together. This extended climax immerses the listener fully into the internal landscape of two people at the edge of their emotional limits, highlighting every subtle breath, every heartbeat, and every quiet gesture as essential to understanding the depth of their struggle and the resilience required to navigate it together. The night had deepened, and the apartment was quieter than ever, so still that one could hear their own heartbeat and breathing. The soft yellow glow from the ceiling lights spilled across the room, casting gentle shadows, creating a sense of warmth and serenity, stark contrast to the tension of the past hours. He and she sat next to each other, hands intertwined, taking deep, synchronized breaths, as if they had just emerged from a violent emotional storm together. He exhaled slowly, the tension in his body gradually dissipating, replaced by a sense of relief and calm understanding. He looked at her, eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you for being patient and standing by me all day." His voice was low, shaky, yet sincere, reflecting a profound shift in his emotional state from frustration and anger to empathy and connection. He realized that pressure and challenges were not the enemy. It was how they faced them together that truly mattered. She smiled softly, gently rubbing his shoulder, eyes warm yet steady. "We don't need to be perfect. Just one step, one task at a time. We share the weight together, little by little." Her words were not just reassurance. They carried a lesson in patience, understanding, and genuine care. In that moment, he felt safe, grounded, and at peace, something that had seemed lost amid the day's stress. They began tidying the apartment together, but this time everything moved slowly, deliberately, and harmoniously. He folded clothes carefully, she washed the dishes with a gentle smile, and they coordinated their movements as if each small act was a step in healing, restoring both their minds and their relationship. Every gesture, from arranging papers to wiping surfaces, placing each dish in its spot, carried emotional significance, reinforcing connection and patience. In this quiet moment, they reflected on the day, the mistakes, the pent-up emotions, the tense moments, and the ways they had overcome them together. He realized that pressure and failure were not frightening if met with shared effort and patience, and that calmness was the only path to resolve challenges without being consumed by emotion. She understood that patience and composure were not just tools for managing tasks, they were bridges for empathy, love, and connection, allowing the other person to feel seen and secure. The apartment was now not only clean and orderly, but also a mirror of their newly organized emotions and minds. Gone was anger and oppression. In its place was understanding, peace, and deep connection. He gently pulled her down onto the sofa, and they leaned against each other. The soft yellow light illuminated their faces, creating a moment of warmth, calm, and togetherness. Words were unnecessary. Their presence alone conveyed the bond and affection that had been missing earlier. They spoke slowly, recalling the events of the day, laughing at the small mishaps, and gradually drawing profound lessons about life. Pressure, failure, and conflict are inevitable, but genuine care, patience, shared responsibility, and empathy are what allow one to overcome any challenge. They understood that no one needs to bear the burden alone, and that facing emotions honestly, recognizing personal limits, and appreciating each other's efforts are essential for harmony and resilience. Finally, they sat together in silence, but it was not emptiness. It was a feeling of completeness, peace, and closure. The listener is left with a natural, deeply satisfying sense of resolution, realizing that while pressure, stress, and conflict are unavoidable, understanding, patience, and love are the keys to enduring and thriving together.